Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, kicking off the series, we see our MC lying in a random forest, with his name revealed to be Kelvin, waking up and wondering where he is. Suddenly a screen pops up, asking Kelvin to start his adventure in this new world. With nothing to do, Kelvin chooses to start his adventure, prompting the screen to suddenly speak, telling Kelvin all about how he had traded his past life's memories in order to be reincarnated. Wondering how crazy his past self was, Kelvin learns about this world's magic and fighting systems, whilst also checking out his stats. Looking closely, Kelvin is surprised to see that his class is more of a support type, but he does get a massive stat boost every time he levels up. Apologizing for overreacting earlier, Kelvin is instructed by the screen to head to the nearest town, making his way through the forest. Chatting for a while, the screen reveals herself as the goddess of reincarnation herself, Melfina, ecstatic that Kelvin had chosen her to be his servant. Seeing Melfina so excited, Kelvin gets weirded out, demanding to know what his past self was thinking, but also realizes he can only hear her because she is his servant. As they enter the town of Parth, Kelvin learns from Melfina that he had accidentally been killed by another god, who felt bad, so they sought out Melfina's help. Upon Kelvin meeting Melfina, Kelvin was instantly love-struck, asking her to come with him when he learned that he would be reincarnated. Since Melfina had been doing her job for centuries, she decided that being reincarnated with Kelvin would be like a vacation, so she agreed to be reincarnated with Kelvin. Hearing Melfina be so carefree, Kelvin demands for his memories back, but Melfina can't do anything about his memories, claiming that past Kelvin claimed that his love for Melfina was worth more than his memories. Hearing this, Kelvin begins to blush, but after calming down, wonders what Melfina must look like. Sadly, Melfina states that Kelvin is currently too weak, having not enough mana to summon her, but nonetheless she'll still be by his side, until he becomes strong enough. Finally making it to the Adventurers Guild, Kelvin spots various adventures, all lining up in front of the receptionist and gathering around the quest board. Personally lining up, Kelvin makes it to the receptionist table, asking to apply as an adventurer. Taking out a form for Kelvin to fill, the receptionist, Ange, asks if he needs help filling out the paper, but Kelvin reveals that he has a skill to read and write this world's language. As he begins working down the paper, Melfina suddenly stops him from putting his class down as summoner, as it's well known that the summoner class is rare, with each nation only having access to one. Fearing that his summoner class may draw attention, Kelvin simply puts down the mage class, finishing up the rest of the paperwork. As Ange heads to process Kelvin's paperwork, Kelvin thinks about how he should keep his reincarnation a secret. Officially given his adventurer's license, Kelvin is placed in the F-rank category, the lowest of all ranks. Ange explains that Kelvin is allowed to accept any quest up to one rank higher than his current rank, but if he fails any quest he'll have to pay a penalty fee. Additionally, adventurers upon completing 10 quests in a row are allowed to be promoted, and that more difficult quests are worth the same as simple ones, meaning there are no extra rewards from taking harder quests. Finally, Ange states that upon reaching rank C, adventurers will have to take an additional rank-up exam before being promoted. Moving on, Kelvin asks if there are any quests currently available for his rank, prompting Ange to hand him 3 simple quests. The 3 quests involve defeating 3 blue slimes, harvesting herbs, or finding a cat. Pondering a bit, Kelvin is instructed by Melfina to take the slime quest, as he can also spend time taming a slime for his first summon. Just like that, Kelvin takes the slime quest, heading to the slime's location, but before he leaves he purchases a wooden rod, an item with no physical attack, but it has small amounts of magic power. Having spent most of his money on the wooden rod, Kelvin finally makes it out of town, heading toward a forest, where he spots 3 blue slimes, temporarily hiding so as to not scare them away. Instructed by Melfina to use his appraisal eye, Kelvin is able to see all of the blue slime stats, shocked at the usefulness of this skill. Melfina tells Kelvin that his appraisal skill is rank S, allowing him to scan the stats of any creature up to 100 levels above his current level, along with any item up to rank S. Hearing the skill's capabilities, Kelvin realizes that since he can't read Melfina's stats, Melfina is above level 100, but that's understandable since she is a god. Focusing back on the slimes, Kelvin asks Melfina how he can form a contract with one of the blue slimes, only to learn that he must beat the slimes until they are weak enough or until they agree to form a contract with him. Hearing this, Kelvin grips his wooden rod, leaping out from the bushes, swinging at the slimes. Sadly, all the slimes react fast enough, dodging Kelvin's advances, only to knock him onto the ground. Having underestimated how agile the slimes could be, Kelvin notices one of the slimes challenging him, which prompts Kelvin to attack the slime, but once again, he's knocked to the ground. Thinking of a plan, Kelvin rushes in close, swinging at the slime, but when the slime jumps and dodges, Kelvin spins around, hitting the slime as it's falling. As the slime falls back, Kelvin checks the slime's stats, seeing that it has now 3 out of its 5 health points. Now ready to tame it, Kelvin extends his arm, offering to form a contract with it, but he suddenly gets a little lightheaded, learning that in order to offer a contract, Kelvin must use half of his current mana. Holding strong, Kelvin suddenly sees the slime disappear, confirming that the slime has accepted his contract. Thinking of a name for his new slime, he decides to call it Clotho, but suddenly senses Clotho within him. Melfina states that Kelvin can communicate with his summons without the need for words, but his summons can also communicate with one another. Calling this phenomenon the servant network, Kelvin decides to summon Clotho, telling Clotho that he'll have to slay his own kind, but Clotho is just happy to be serving Kelvin. As Kelvin tracks down the other 2 slimes, he orders Clotho to take down one of the slimes, whilst he'll kill the other. Since Clotho is Kelvin's summon, Clotho will be stronger than regular slimes. As for Kelvin, Melfina had just taught him some new spells, but he only has enough mana to show off one of them. With both jumping from their hiding spots, Kelvin is able to cast a wind slash, killing his slime, but is impressed at Clotho's speed, easily killing him. Wondering how strong Clotho has become, Kelvin learns that any creature he summons will automatically gain 100 extra ability points to all of their stats. Additionally, Melfina reveals that Kelvin is the only existing S-rank summoner, and the next best is a rank B and C summoner, who can only provide 20 and 10 stat boosts. In the meantime, Clotho has tracked down and killed another slime, marking the completion of their quest, having killed 3 slimes. Returning to the guild to claim his reward, Kelvin reasons that he should find a place to stay for the night, but suddenly hears a crowd forming in an alley. Moving closer, he notices several slaves being placed on sale, wondering if they could act as another of his summons. Just then, the slave master begins showing off an elf that he had captured, but sadly he states that the elf is a mixed half-elf. Getting lost in the elf's beauty for a moment, Kelvin leaves the location, heading to the Spirit Song Inn, a place Ange the receptionist recommended. Heading in, he greets Claire the innkeeper, asking for a room and a meal. As Claire prepares the meal, Kelvin heads to his room, sad that the inn doesn't have a bathroom, and that only nobles have access to such luxuries. Pondering a bit on the types of adventures he'll experience, he suddenly is called by the innkeeper, digging into the meal that she has prepared, all whilst wondering what types of creatures exist in this world. The next couple days, Kelvin and Clotho begin grinding quest, leveling up several times with the help of his double growth rate skill, granting him double skill points that can be used later on. After a while, Kelvin had accumulated 100 skill points, choosing to learn the skill Concealment, a rank D ability, which can be used to keep a low profile moving forward. After completing 10 quests consecutively, Kelvin heads back to the guild greeting Ange, who congratulates Kelvin's promotion to rank E. Seeing Kelvin rank up so fast, she admits that she feared that Kelvin would die without support from a party. But Kelvin knows that he can't party up with other adventurers, since his skills as a summoner would be revealed. Hearing some adventurers off to the side grow jealous of Kelvin's speedy rank up, Ange asks Kelvin if he is secretly a high-ranking noble, but Kelvin states that he can't speak of his past because things are complicated. Apologizing for prying, Ange asks if Kelvin will be grinding for rank D, worried that Kelvin may be overworking. But Kelvin reassures Ange that he can easily just run away if he encounters anything dangerous. Seeing Kelvin so energetic, Ange recommends Kelvin get new gear, having been only using his wooden rod this entire time. Accepting Ange's advice, Kelvin asks if there are any D-rank quests Ange recommends, but before Ange can offer up any options, someone butts in. Asking if Kelvin would like to take down a Black Ghost Knight, Casual appears from nowhere, having just returned from a C-rank quest involving lizardmen. Turning to Kelvin, Cashel congratulates Kelvin for reaching rank E so fast, but Kelvin asks who Cashel is. Apologizing for being so abrupt, Cashel introduces himself as a rank D adventurer, but as everyone listens into their conversation, other adventurers begin whispering that Cashel is actually strong enough to be a B-rank adventurer, and that Cashel loves crushing newbies that may threaten him in the future. Hearing the other adventurers spoiling his intentions, Cashel glares at the adventurers, silencing them in an instant. Turning back to Kelvin, Cashel offers Kelvin to join his party, stating that they'll be taking on the Black Ghost Knight. Hearing this, Ainge butts in, stating that the Black Ghost Knight is a rank D quest, but it's actually harder than a rank D quest. Seeing Ainge all worked up, Cashel says he'll be there with his party to support Kelvin, forcing Ainge to back down for now. Seeing Ainge so uncomfortable, Kelvin declines Cashel's offer, but Cashel continues to persuade Kelvin to join. Knowing that something is off about Cashel, Kelvin scans Cashel's stats, surprised that Cashel is just as strong as Clotho. On top of that, Cashel has some dangerous abilities, but most importantly, he has been given the title Murderer. Knowing that Cashel won't let Kelvin leave without joining him, Kelvin offers an alternative plan, suggesting that they both compete to see who can slay the Ghost Knight first. Seeing Kelvin's cocky attitude, Cashel smirks, stating that he'll be taking on the Ghost Knight with his party, but Kelvin says it's fine, telling Cashel he'll be going solo. As Cashel leaves, Kelvin deduces that Cashel plans to allow Kelvin to reach the Ghost Knight first, then either during or after the battle, will Cashel and his party show up and make their move. Wondering who could be in Cashel's party, the receptionist along with Ainge, all ask that Kelvin be careful. Following Cashel, we see him enter an alley where he meets up with Gimel, one of his party members, who has a rank C appraising eye. Gimel reveals that he had tried to scan Kelvin's stats, but was blocked out by Kelvin's concealment skill, reasoning that Kelvin is no pushover since his concealment skill is rank C or stronger. Interrupting another of Cashel's party members, Raj asks if he can pummel Kelvin, just like how he did to other adventurers, but Kelvin asks that Raj hold back for now, commending Kelvin for being so brave as to challenge their party. That evening, Cashel and his members make it to the castle of the Ghost Knight, shocked to see that all the undeads guarding the castle have been slaughtered. Just then Kelvin appears, greeting Cashel and his party, all whilst holding a magic staff. Seeing Kelvin's items, Cashel and his party members deduce that Kelvin is of the mage class, wondering if Kelvin needed help defeating the Ghost Knight boss. Correcting them, Kelvin states that he can handle the boss on his own, revealing that he knows Cashel and his party are up to no good. With Cashel and his members now on guard, they demand to know if Kelvin is a bounty hunter, accidentally revealing that Raj and Gimel both have bounties for their capture. Now with a reason to capture everyone, Kelvin starts off by taunting Raj, prompting Raj to charge at Kelvin. Before Raj can reach Kelvin, he is caught in Kelvin's mud trap, which permanently binds Raj on the spot. Shocked that he was unable to sense Kelvin's traps, Gimel begins to freak out, running away as he senses something off with Kelvin. Not willing to allow Gimel to escape, Kelvin summons Clotho, who has blocked Gimel's escape route, revealing his new transformed form. As Clotho chases Gimel back into the room with the others, we flash back to several days ago, when Kelvin and Clotho were fighting some creatures. Upon killing the creatures, Clotho started acting strange, suddenly evolving into a slime Bloodonia, a creature classified to have a fraction of the Demon King's strength. Catching and slamming Gimel against a wall, which makes Kelvin scan Gimel's stats, noting how Gimel had low endurance. With one member down, Raj attempts to take on Clotho himself, but is easily restrained by Clotho. Rushing in close to strike Kelvin, Cashel grips his blade, but sadly is easily overpowered by Kelvin. Having interrogated them, Kelvin learns that Cashel and his party had resorted to hunting new adventures as a way to level up fast, instead of fighting monsters. Tying the three up, and looting them, Kelvin finally heads into the boss room. Upon entering the boss room, Kelvin spots the Ghost Knight standing in the middle of the room. Scanning the Ghost Knight's stats, Kelvin notes the Ghost Knight's is level 53 and that he has a name. Calling out to the Ghost Knight, Kelvin asks to form a contract with it, only to be surprised when the Ghost Knight offers to have a chat. The Ghost Knight says that he used to be a human, serving his country as a knight captain, but has died mysteriously. The Ghost Knight believes that he has unfinished business in this world, explaining his cursed form. As the Ghost Knight rambles on and on about his past life, Kelvin realizes that the Ghost Knight is just a normal old man, but snaps out of it, asking once again if the Ghost Knight would like to form a contract. Pondering for a bit, the Ghost Knight is not opposed to it, since his king and the country he served no longer exists, but he and Kelvin are both curious how strong each other are. Officially introducing himself as Gerald, the Ghost Knight readies his sword, prompting Kelvin and Clotho to initiate Gerald. Using Clotho to restrain Gerald, Kelvin hits Gerald with a spell, but is not surprised when it doesn't leave a mark. Retaliating, Gerald begins slicing the air, sending projectiles in Kelvin's direction. Knowing that he should end this quickly, Kelvin casts a gravity spell, pressing Kelvin into the floor, but as Gerald begins fighting against the weight of the spell, he suddenly remembers things from his past life. Flashing back, Alcarl was a small country known for its farmland, where Gerald called home. One day, an elf by the name of Gildora visited their country demanding that their country fall under the Elven Kingdom. When the king refused, their country became cursed, leading hundreds to fall ill, including Gerald's daughter and wife. When the king himself had passed, Gerald had no choice but to leave town, mindlessly seeking for a way to avenge the death of his home and family. With all these memories returning to Gerald, he suddenly gains a burst of energy, breaking free from Kelvin's gravity spell, only to lunge forward. Before Gerald can land a fatal strike, Kelvin has Clotho intercept, blasting Gerald with a powerful beam, ending the duel. The next day, Kelvin submits a piece of Gerald's armor as proof of slaying the Ghost Knight, impressing everyone in the guild. On top of that, everyone had learned of Cashel and his party's capture, thanking Kelvin for putting them behind bars. Chatting privately with Ainge, she is happy to see that Kelvin is alright, telling Kelvin that since the Ghost Knight quest was technically a special quest, his rank will be increased. As Kelvin heads up the stairs, it's revealed that Gerald has officially become one of Kelvin's summons, leaving 7 more slots for possible summons. As Kelvin turns a corner, he is suddenly greeted by the Guildmaster, having been waiting for Kelvin. Greeting the Guildmaster, Kelvin and the Guildmaster exchange pleasant words, but after some chatting, the Guildmaster officially introduces himself as Leo, the head of the Parth Adventurers Guild. Right after, the Guildmaster surprises Kelvin, asking if Kelvin is from another world. Immediately scanning the Guildmaster's stats, Kelvin realizes that the Guildmaster's appraising eye is rank A, 1 rank higher than his rank B concealment ability, allowing the Guildmaster to see all of Kelvin's stats. Sitting down with the Guildmaster, Kelvin grows more and more tense, hearing that the Guildmaster is amazed that Kelvin is a summoner, able to catch Cashel and his party, along with completing a quest involving the Ghost Knight with the help of his summons. Suddenly Gerald tells Kelvin to turn the situation around, as having someone like a Guildmaster as a friend will be very valuable in the future. Realizing that Gerald is right, Kelvin loosens up, admitting that he is indeed a summoner, but Kelvin wonders why the Guildmaster didn't do anything about Cashel, if he already knew he was a murderer. The Guildmaster reveals that Cashel is a noble, meaning that the Guildmaster couldn't do anything until he had definite proof of Cashel's wrongdoings. Seeing as Cashel and his men will be punished regardless, Kelvin changes topics, demanding to know why the Guildmaster wants to meet now of all times. The Guildmaster states that he has no intention of becoming enemies with Kelvin, in fact he would rather they be friends, revealing that he has met others from another world. Shocked to hear this, Kelvin learns that the others reincarnated are called the heroes of the Holy Empire Derme, which Melfina recognizes, having been the one to reincarnate these heroes. The Guildmaster adds that a priestess had unraveled a prophecy involving the Demon King, hence why the heroes were summoned. The Guildmaster reasons that ever since the Demon King had been revived, more monsters have become more strong and violent, and it may also be the reason why Gerald was cursed to be immortal for so long. Hearing the Guildmaster's concerns, Kelvin deduces that the Guildmaster intends to have the heroes focus on the Demon King, and have Kelvin defend the cities whilst the heroes are away. Confirming Kelvin's suspicions, the Guildmaster offers to pay extra for Kelvin's services, even increasing his rank so that Kelvin will have no issues with taking on any quest. But Kelvin knows that the Guildmaster's conditions are too good, which prompts the Guildmaster to reveal that he knows the reason Kelvin didn't reveal himself as someone from another world, along with being a summoner, is because Kelvin didn't want to get involved with some random politics that will come of people wanting his insane power. The Guildmaster offers that he'll guarantee Kelvin is never roped into a power struggle as long as they can work together. Amazed at the Guildmaster's assessment, Kelvin has no choice but to accept this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Returning to his inn, Kelvin is greeted by Claire, who's happy to learn that Kelvin is now rank B. As a celebration, Claire promises to cook something nice, but first hands Kelvin some lunch. As Kelvin digs into his lunch, he asks for Melfina to explain who the heroes she summoned to this world are. Melfina reveals that when the priestess of the Holy Kingdom asked her to gift them with some heroes that could rival the Demon King, Melfina simply searched for some good-looking boys and girls to be heroes, but by now they should be at a decent level. Hearing this, Kelvin knows that it was Melfina that had summoned the Demon King to this world, restarting the cycle of the Demon King versus the heroes. But Melfina has seen this story play out multiple times, asking that Kelvin leave the Demon King to the heroes. As Kelvin lays in bed, thinking of what transpired during his fight with Gerald, he suddenly gets an idea, sitting up and summoning Clotho. Asking Clotho to spit out a bag of gold, Kelvin is amazed that Clotho has the ability to store and retrieve any item. Heading downstairs, Kelvin asks that Claire cook up an extra meal for dinner, heading out in search of something. As Kelvin heads through town, his summons ask where Kelvin is heading, learning that Kelvin intends to buy a slave. Accusing Kelvin of wanting to do naughty things with a slave, Kelvin corrects his summons, stating that his battle with Gerald was very close, so if he wants to face stronger enemies in the future, he should focus on expanding and powering up in summons quicker. Kelvin reveals that slaves are unable to use their skill points without their master's permission, so it would be best to search for a slave that hasn't been touched, and ideally have someone in the support role that can assist with ranged attacks long range, whilst able to also heal the party. Finally making it to the alley with the slave trader, Kelvin witnesses a customer set on fire, upon approaching the half-elf. The slave trader reveals that the elf is cursed, prompting Kelvin to scan the elf, realizing that her skill points haven't been touched at all. Asking Melfina if she knows how to break the elf's curse, Melfina states that a rank a spell from a light magic user should do the trick, making Kelvin head off somewhere. A few hours later, Kelvin returns, asking to purchase the elf, shocking the slave trader, as he fears Kelvin will die at the hands of the elf's curse. Ignoring the slave trader's words, Kelvin pays for the elf, bringing tears to her eyes as she has finally been let out of her cage. As Kelvin leads the elf back to his inn, she stops him, thanking Kelvin for rescuing her, telling him her name is Ephil. Asking about Ephil's backstory, Ephil tells Kelvin that ever since she was born, she had been a slave, not even able to remember her parents' faces. Wanting to comfort her, Kelvin moves in for a hug, but Ephil jumps back, traumatized at her own curse, not wanting to hurt anyone anymore. Telling Ephil that she can trust him, Kelvin easily breaks Ephil's curse, showing her that she can now touch people, without cursing them. Falling to her knees, Ephil begins shedding tears of joy, thanking Kelvin for releasing her from her cursed life. But Kelvin thinks about how it was worth using his remaining skill points to learn a rank a white magic spell to break Ephil's curse. Returning to the inn, Claire greets Kelvin, shocked to see that he is accompanied by a pretty girl. Suspecting Kelvin for wanting to do some naughty things with her, Claire offers to clean and dress Ephil up before dinner. Waiting for a while, Claire and Ephil finally return, with Ephil shy to show off her new outfit. Completely focused on Ephil's beauty, Kelvin secretly thanks Claire for dressing Ephil in a maid outfit. As Claire serves the two dinners, Kelvin is happy to see Ephil so grateful for a decent meal, but after the meal, he introduces the rest of his summons to Ephil, asking that she keep his abilities as a summoner a secret. Next, Kelvin has Ephil take skills that help her growth rate and ability to acquire skill points, allowing Ephil to choose her own skills. That night, Kelvin runs into an issue, forced to share a bed with Ephil and not being able to sleep whatsoever, but at the same time a mysterious girl is seen tied up elsewhere. Skipping ahead a month, Kelvin is seen training with his party in a nearby forest, proud that Ephil has decided to take on the role of an archer. On top of that, Ephil had taken up sewing, and as a result she has been able to enhance her current battle-maid outfit with enchantments. As Gerald and Kelvin engage a massive monster, Ephil begins charging up a powerful fire arrow, releasing and striking the creature, completely incinerating it. With Kelvin heading back to the guild to submit his quest, Ainge is impressed, clarifying that Kelvin only needs to complete one more quest before he can take the rank up exam to be officially rank A. But since Ephil is also considered an adventurer, Kelvin reminds Ephil that she'll also be reaching rank B soon, having reached rank C recently. As Ainge and Kelvin look at each other, they both think about how skilled Ephil is, since she needed to take a rank up exam to be in rank C. During her rank up exam, she had cloaked herself with invisibility, throwing her examiner off, and before the examiner could track Ephil, Ephil fired an arrow at the examiner's head, ending the exam. Ainge reiterates how the examiner was a veteran adventurer, and to have Ephil defeat him so quickly is impressive. Changing topics, Ainge tells Ephil about a new sweet store that opened up, asking if she would like to visit the store together. Seeing Ainge and Ephil so close, Kelvin can't help but feel happy, but is suddenly asked by Ephil to join them. With some advice from Ainge, Kelvin accepts Ephil's offer, agreeing to meet up tomorrow. The next day, Kelvin waits in the agreed-upon spot, spotting various couples nearby, wondering if he is on a date. Brushing the naughty thoughts aside, he spots Ainge, complimenting her cute looks. But Ainge wonders where Ephil is, prompting Kelvin to tell her Ephil will be late, as she is still dressing up. Hearing this, Ainge realizes the Ephil will be competition, asking that Kelvin relax and treat each other comfortably. Not realizing what Ainge meant, Kelvin agrees, but the two are interrupted by Ephil, having finally arrived. With a single glance, Kelvin becomes frozen in Ephil's presence, but soon snaps out of it complimenting Ephil's beauty. On top of that, Ainge gets jealous, pinching Ephil for being so attractive. As the trio finally make their way to the sweets store, they sit down and order an assortment of food, only for Ephil to offer to feed Kelvin. Seeing this, Ainge teases Kelvin for being so close with Ephil, drawing attention from onlookers, who grow jealous that Kelvin is currently hanging out with two beautiful women. Hearing all the gossip around him, Kelvin attempts to set things straight, but no one believes him, putting Kelvin in a sour mood. As the girls indulge in the food, a person's voice is suddenly heard nearby, but out of nowhere their assortment of food is kicked to the ground. Two knights order everyone to bow their heads, as they are currently in the presence of the third prince Trison. Asking to know who Trison is, Kelvin learns that Trison belongs to a military family, meaning he's of a high noble status. Seeing the girls with Kelvin, Trison and his knights demand that Kelvin hand over the girls, and in exchange, he'll let Kelvin go without any harm. Hearing the men's disgusting demands, Kelvin blasts the two knights into a nearby wall, terrifying Trison. Binding Trison in place, Kelvin demands to know why a noble is here, but when Trison refuses to answer, Kelvin brings Trison to his knees. Now willing to answer, Trison states that he's heard rumors of a powerful adventurer in town, and that he knows his knights are weak, so he's here to hire a powerful adventurer that'll serve him. Realizing that he is the one Trison is searching for, Kelvin declines the spoiled noble's offer, knocking him out, leaving the scene. Elsewhere in the Holy Empire, a priestess, Colette, is seen calling upon Melfina, showing Melfina the adventurers and how strong they're getting. Happy to hear things are running smoothly, Melfina tells Colette of a prophecy, intentionally having Colette guide the heroes away from the town Kelvin is currently staying at. Just as Melfina finishes up and leaves, the heroes arrive, asking about this new prophecy. That night, Kelvin and Ephil once again share a bed, both facing away from one another. Thanking Kelvin for saving her earlier, Kelvin tells her that it's a given that he'll protect her forever, but hearing this Ephil wonders if Kelvin truly loves her as a person or as a slave. As Ephil begins to break down at the thought of her past, Kelvin promises that she'll never have to go back to the life of isolation, as he'll always be by her side moving forward. As they both embrace, Kelvin notes how he should think about getting separate rooms. The next morning, Kevlin and all his summons begin looking through this world's heroes' stats, thanks to Melfina, who had recently learned of the heroes' progress. Frustrated, Kelvin reveals that the heroes are not even level 100 yet, and they've been here for around a year, wondering what they've been doing all this time. Asking Melfina if the heroes will be able to defeat the Demon King in time, Melfina says this is actually a normal rate for the heroes to be growing, it's just that Kelvin and his gang are growing substantially faster than anyone. Happy to hear that, Kelvin announces his new blacksmithing skill, unveiling a newly crafted rank A staff. On top of that, Gerald has acquired a new shield and cape, and Ephil has created a new sage robe for Kelvin. Suddenly Claire knocks on the door, telling Kelvin that he's being summoned by the guild. Sitting down with the guildmaster, Kelvin learns of a demon sighting in a rank D cave. Not normal as demons, dragons and angels are all the rarest creatures in this world. The guildmaster tells Kelvin that the demon's strength is unknown, apologizing for asking Kelvin to take on such a dangerous quest. Before Kelvin can speak his mind, the guildmaster mentions how there was a prince that visited town recently, but was assaulted, hinting at the fact that because of Kelvin, the guildmaster has been working tirelessly to keep relations with the nobles clean. Seeing as he has to make up for assaulting the noble, Kelvin accepts his quest, terrified about what the guildmaster knows. As the gang head towards the demon sighting, the gang greet the adventurer in charge of containing the creature in the cave, taking Kelvin and his party to the hidden passage. With Ephil lighting the way, the gang begin making their way through the cave, throwing Kelvin off, as he doesn't sense any monsters nearby. As they stop in front of a massive door, they all sense the demon's presence, but also a far more potent creature inside. As Kelvin opens the giant doors, he spots a demon girl strung up, but turns to face another demon, who introduces themselves as an archdemon, Victor. Hearing Victor as an archdemon, Kelvin can't help but get excited, but first he demands to know who the demon girl is. Victor casts a barrier around the room, announcing that the girl was the former demon lord Gustav's daughter. Wondering why Victor is so willingly telling them all of this, Victor reveals that he plans to break the demon girl's seal, but only a human strong enough can break her seal. Lunging at Kelvin, Gerald is able to block Victor's advances, but is confused when Victor reveals he has the ability to copy the skills of anyone he devours. But Victor adds that, the more the target knows about his abilities, the stronger Victor becomes. Hearing this, Kelvin deduces that Victor is planning to eat a powerful human, free the demon girl, and devour her, gaining the power to become the Demon King himself. Confirming Kelvin's suspicions, Victor wonders why Kelvin is grinning so much, but Kelvin tells Victor that he's simply so happy to be able to fight a rank S monster. Happy to see that Kelvin is so fired up to fight, Victor raises his arm casting a black magic spell, Hades' army, cursing and creating some undeads. Annoyed that Victor is capable of dark magic, Kelvin notes how their numbers advantage had immediately been removed, bracing himself as Victor has his undead attack. Quickly scanning them, Kelvin sees that the undead's levels are all rank B and above, stating that it would be best to kill them before they overwhelm his party. Casting several wind slashes, Kelvin is able to clear a wave of undeads, but more undeads simply take the place of the first wave, swarming not only Kelvin, but Gerald and Ephil as well. Impressed at the persistent waves, Gerald carves a path to Victor, asking that Kelvin assist with any undeads that he may miss. As our duo make their way towards Victor, Victor can't help but compliment their movements and synergy, wondering how Kelvin is so young but has so much battle experience. Ignoring Victor's praises, Kelvin demands that Victor bring out his next trick, catching Victor's attention, as Victor confirms that Kelvin is enjoying facing off against his techniques. Matching Kelvin's energy, Victor slams the ground, creating a smokescreen. With Gerald and Kelvin now on high alert, they both track Victor's presence, with Gerald suddenly forced to block one of Victor's strikes, noting how Victor is moving strangely, as he's moving in and out of the ground. Knowing this, Kelvin is able to dodge Victor's sudden attacks, but Victor changes strategies, encasing his palms with dark magic, blasting and knocking Gerald away. Seeing this, Kelvin notes how Gerald's armor is good against physical attacks, but weak to magic attacks, making Gerald a bad matchup for Victor at close range. Before Kelvin can draw Victor away from Gerald, Kelvin is barely able to dodge one of Victor's attacks, having used the smoke to hide the fact that Victor had extended his arm to sneak up on Kelvin. As Kelvin jumps back from Victor's arm, he realizes that he had fallen for Victor's trap, unintentionally moving closer to Victor to be devoured. Immediately calling for Clotho to stick onto and bind Victor, Kelvin reveals that he had intentionally hidden Clotho just for a sneak attack of his own, immediately casting a binding spell, right as Victor breaks free from Clotho's grips. Happy to see Victor is binded, Kelvin and Gerald both spot Victor beginning to break free from the binding spell, both making preparations to strike Victor down. As Kelvin enchants Gerald's sword, Gerald charges towards the stationary Victor, but Victor smirks, as he has extended his arm once again through the smoke, ready to strike Kelvin down from behind. Having read Victor's intentions, Kelvin calls for Eiffel to reveal herself, throwing Victor off, as Eiffel has an invisibility spell that even he couldn't detect. As Eiffel charges up a fire arrow, she releases it in Victor's direction, forcing him to retract his extended arm, just to block the arrow from striking him down. With Victor distracted, Gerald had made his way into the striking zone, easily cleaving off one of Victor's arms, only to immediately retreat back to Kelvin's position. Impressed that Kelvin and his party had been able to do so much damage to him, Victor admits that he had underestimated them, but Victor immediately begins casting a dark magic spell, encasing himself with a dark cloud. Knowing that Victor is attempting to regenerate and power up, Kelvin orders to attack Victor, prompting Kelvin to lead with an earth spell, only to have Eiffel shoot a fire arrow at Victor's shadowy form. Next, Gerald slashes the air, creating a projectile that lands cleanly on Victor, but it's too late as Victor has officially powered up. With Victor immediately dashing towards them, Kelvin orders Gerald to focus on defense, intercepting and halting Victor's advances. With his new powered-up body, Victor easily knocks Gerald aside, but Eiffel provides backup, firing projectiles and working together with Gerald to distract Victor long enough for Kelvin to get into position. From above, Kelvin casts a flame spell, drawing Victor's attention, allowing Clotho to move in close enough, unleashing a barrage of failed blacksmithing weapons that Kelvin had created and stored in Clotho. Next up, Kelvin, Eiffel and Clotho all simultaneously blast Victor with their most powerful spell, but instead of dodging, Victor mysteriously tanks the blast. As the cave begins to crumble due to their battle, a huge rock falls from the ceiling, heading towards the demon girl's positioning. Seeing this, Kelvin is unable to react to save her, but is surprised when Victor himself protects the demon girl. As the smoke clears, Kelvin and his party spots Victor bleeding out on the floor, admitting defeat. As final words, Kelvin states that he knows Victor had never planned to eat the demon girl, asking why Victor lied to him. Victor reveals that he needed Kelvin to fight him seriously, and that Victor is in fact the assigned caretaker of the demon girl, given the role by the previous demon king himself. Flashing back 700 years ago, we see Victor training the demon girl, teaching her how to infuse her strikes with her magic. It's revealed that the demon girl's name is Sarah, but Sarah wonders why she is forbidden from leaving her home, as she's jealous her father, Gustav the Demon King, always gets to explore the world. Hearing this, Victor thinks about how Gustav had intentionally hidden Sarah's existence, fearing his enemies would use her against him. Sadly, due to Gustav's protectiveness of Sarah, Sarah had no friends, as she was never allowed to leave or interact with anyone outside her home. Eventually, the heroes finally made it to Gustav's home. The Demon King had prioritized the safety of his daughter, assigning Victor to protect her forever, but just in case Gustav had sealed away Sarah's demon powers as a way to conceal her connection with the Demon King himself. Having been hiding and protecting Sarah all this time in this cave, Victor had hoped the heroes of the world would die off and never be resurrected, but sadly his wish never came true. With his last breath, Victor asks that Kelvin accept Sarah as one of his summons, catching Kelvin off guard as Victor had figured out his party members are actually his summons. As Victor passes away, Kelvin makes his way over to Sarah, breaking her seal, and accepting her into his party. As Kelvin and his gang make it out of the cave, Kelvin is able to make up an excuse regarding Sarah's existence, even concealing her demon horn and wings with an item Victor had left behind to help conceal Sarah's true identity. As the gang recoup on a mountain, Kelvin checks the stats of Gerald, impressed that Gerald has evolved into an abyssal knight, an S-rank creature. Turning to Sarah, Kelvin asks if she has calmed down and accepted her situation, which Sarah says she's still trying to take everything in, but first they all return to town. Since Sarah has never been outside, Sarah is immediately overjoyed to see human culture, running and checking out the stores in town. Asking that Eiffel and Gerald watch over Sarah for a bit, Kelvin heads to the guild to sort out and explain to the guild how he was able to defeat the demon in the cave. After chatting with the guild, Kelvin had officially been promoted to rank A and was able to hide Sarah's existence, but was pissed to hear that the guild had intended to capture and use the demon for future experimentations. Returning to his inn, Kelvin is surprised to see everyone there, all ready to celebrate Kelvin's promotion to rank A. As everyone parties hard, they all eventually knock out, but Kelvin in the middle of the night wakes up, wondering where Sarah must have gone. Outside, Sarah sits alone, staring at the move, reminiscing about her time with Victor and how he had promised to show her the outside world. Since Victor is no longer with her, Sarah promises to explore the world, asking for Victor to watch over her as she lives her new life. As Sarah returns back to the inn, Kelvin is seen overhearing Sarah's ideals, promising to give Sarah the life that Victor and her father wanted for her. Several days later, Kelvin announced that his blacksmithing skill is now rank S and so is Ephil's sewing skill, meaning they'll both be able to craft more powerful equipment. First, Kelvin gives Sarah Erendite a pair of rank S gloves to allow Sarah to engage in close combat. Next, Ephil gives Sarah some rank S armor, called Queen's Terror, which Sarah appreciates as the armor's name sounds cool. Knowing that Victor meant a lot to Sarah, Kelvin reveals to Sarah that he had used Victor's armor to help craft the gloves, making her feel as if Victor is fighting beside her. Finally, Kelvin gives Gerald the Sword of Dainsleif, a rank S sword that has the exact dimensions of Gerald's previous blade, but with better stats. Thanking Kelvin for the gifts, Sarah wonders why Kelvin and Ephil don't have any upgrades, but Kelvin smirks, telling Sarah that they do have upgrades, but they'll only show the others when they fight their next big monster. Having slaved away for several days, upgrading his party's equipment, Kelvin uses Clotho as a pillow, beginning to drift asleep. Before Kelvin falls asleep, Ephil asks if Kelvin would like anything to eat, but Kelvin unconsciously whispers that he wants rice. With everyone in his party wondering what rice is, Kelvin sits up, realizing that this world doesn't even have the bare essentials for food, compared to his previous life. The next day, the gang are seen traveling by carriage, passing by a gorgeous river, which catches Sarah's attention. Having never been outside before, Sarah can't help but be amazed by the amazing scenery, which gives Kelvin the idea to go fishing. When Sarah asks to know what fishing is, Kelvin states that once they reach the country of Turai, he'll show Sarah what fishing is. Kelvin reminds the gang that their destination is the water country of Turai, a country near the ocean. Traveling there, Kelvin gets to keep his promise and show Sarah the outside world, but at the same time, he can figure out a way to grow rice. Apparently Turai is meant to have something similar to rice, and it was quite easy to leave town, after speaking with Leo the guildmaster. During the carriage ride, Kelvin thinks about how it doesn't feel the same without Melfina with them. Flashing back, one night whilst Kelvin and other adventurers were celebrating and drinking, Kelvin had awoken in the middle of the night, only to have a chat with Melfina. During their chat, Kelvin learns that it might be impossible to officially summon and see Melfina's true form, since she is a god, but she reveals that there might be a workaround if she uses one of her avatars. Wondering about Melfina's avatar, Kelvin learns that Melfina can possess and become these so-called avatars, hiding the fact that she is a god. Excited at the thought that she may be finally able to show Kelvin her true form, Melfina disappears, hoping to return soon. Spotting a mini boat floating down the river, Sarah asks if she could ride it, but Kelvin says they'll do that next time, as Ephil butts in, asking Kelvin about a section of the book she's reading. A little longer later, Sarah sits up, asking Kelvin if he can sense some people watching them, prompting Kelvin to tell his party to not act just yet. Just then, a random woman runs out and blocks the carriage's path, announcing themselves as Black Wind. Wondering who they are, the carriage driver explains that the Black Wind are a bunch of bandits that have become famous recently near the town of Turai. Immediately scanning the bandits' stats, Kelvin realizes that the bandits are no more than level 30, allowing Sarah to have some fun and play with the bandits, but Kelvin forbids Sarah from using her gloves. Still pumped to fight, Sarah hops out of the carriage, greeting the bandits, but when they lay eyes on Sarah, the bandits begin to mock and underestimate Sarah. Blowing back one of the bandits, the leader of the bandits orders her men to rush Sarah, but Sarah also knocks them all back. Sensing someone from behind, Sarah catches the hammer of a huge bandit, shocking the bandit's leader, as Kelvin reveals that Sarah is level 75. Finishing up the leader's henchman, Sarah approaches the leader, teasing and tying everyone up, all whilst she compliments her own strength. Seeing Kelvin and his party relaxed, the bandits' leader speaks up, warning them that their leader is level 70 in an attempt to scare Kelvin and his gang, but this only makes Sarah and Kelvin more interested to meet this person. Finally making it to town, Kelvin notes how this town reminds him of Japan, but more importantly the sea next to the town is utterly gorgeous. As Sarah stares out into the sea, she's sad to not experience this moment with Victor, but still asks if Kelvin is willing to teach her. Promising her that he will, Kelvin states that they must turn in the bandits that they captured. Heading to the town's guild, the Toraj's guildmaster, Mist, personally thanks Kelvin and his party for capturing the bandits. Sitting down, Kelvin and his members introduce themselves, asking if Guildmaster Leo had told Mist about them. Guildmaster Mist says that Leo has only been talking to her about Kelvin's amazing feats, revealing that Leo and her were originally adventurers in the same party. Getting down to business, Kelvin states that after interrogating the bandits, they learnt that the boss of the bandits, Kristoff, was originally an adventurer from the town of Trison, having personally defeated the Black Wind bandits themselves. But after a while, Kristoff took over the Black Wind bandits, becoming their leader and began kidnapping people. Since Kristoff's evil doings are still unknown to many, he's still considered a trusted adventurer, therefore attacking him will cause some political issues. Instead, Mist suggests that Kelvin and the gang think of an alternative, but Kelvin secretly thinks about how weak Kristoff is, and how unmotivated he is to hunt Kristoff down. Suddenly, Kelvin senses 4 powerful beings nearby, asking Sarah if she senses them as well, realizing that the 4 heroes are coincidentally in town. Getting an idea, Kelvin announces that he'll get the heroes to take down Kristoff. Calling the heroes to her office, Guildmaster Mist asks the heroes to assist with a special quest, having been told to do so by Kelvin. Toya, the leader of the heroes, accepts the offer, but the other heroes question whether they should even be wasting time, as they've been instructed to head to the Empire of Risia by the goddess Melfina. Elsewhere in a dungeon, 2 bandits guard a cell, containing captured people. With one of the bandits entering the cell, he stops in front of a young girl and her mother, demanding for them to come with him. But before he can do anything weird, Kelvin and his party arrive, immediately knocking out the 2 bandits, before they can even react. With the captured people now safe, we cut over to Kristoff, discussing how he's heard reports of his underlings slowly being captured, meaning that his and his party's evil doings may be discovered. Just then they hear a knock on the door, asking whoever to come in, but instead, Kelvin, Gerald and Sarah all rush in. Seeing Kelvin's party so strong, Kristoff gets fired up, ready to face Kelvin, but instead Kelvin states that Kristoff is nothing more than a pawn to him. Cutting to the heroes, we see that they've made it into the same dungeon, cautiously exploring the place. Toya asks Setsuna to scan the area, but Setsuna can only report that there are many people nearby, unable to detect the people's power, as they are quite strong. As the 4 stop in front of a door, they all ready themselves, rushing in, only to spot a huge slime guarding the captured people. Believing that the slime is evil, Toya prepares to attack Clotho, but a little girl stops him, explaining that Clotho belongs to the person that saved them. Apologizing for the misunderstanding, Toya introduces himself and his party to everyone, asking Nana, the tamer of their group, to talk to Clotho. Nana learns that Clotho has been placed here to guard the captured, shocking everyone, as someone is able to summon such a powerful slime. Rushing ahead to meet this person, the heroes enter a room, noticing Kristoff and his party are all knocked out, wondering if Kristoff was the one that summoned Clotho. But suddenly Toya senses a disturbing presence, heading deeper into the room, only to spot Kelvin and his party waiting for them. Sitting on a couch, with his summons beside him, Kelvin puts on an evil demeanor, stating that Kristoff and his members were too weak. Playing up the evil character, Kelvin mocks the heroes, prompting them to officially introduce themselves as Toya Kanzaki, Setsuna Shiga, Nana Mizuoka and Miyabi Kuromiya. Promising that they'll defeat evil scum like Kelvin, Kelvin continues to play the villain, mocking the heroes' strength, which only enrages Toya. Offering to play a game, Kelvin suggests that he alone will take on the 4 heroes, but this confuses the heroes, as they wonder why Kelvin would even give them such a numbers advantage. Thinking for a bit, Setsuna reasons Kelvin is probably hiding something, and that fighting as 4 will probably be better for them, so they all accept Kelvin's challenge. As Kelvin's summons sit down, preparing to watch Kelvin duel the heroes, they all note how Kelvin had intentionally had the heroes come to Kristoff's hideout, as the heroes will be able to convince everyone that Kristoff is evil. But Kelvin's summons also know that Kelvin wanted to see how strong the heroes truly are himself. Jealous that Kelvin gets to have all the fun, Sarah begins to throw a tantrum, but Kelvin had prepared for this, asking Ephil to fetch the basket he had prepared. Opening the basket, Kelvin asks that Sarah along with the others just sit back and eat, watching him put on a good show. But this time Ephil speaks up, worried that although the heroes are at a much lower level than Kelvin, Kelvin will be in trouble as he's not a close-range fighter. Hearing this, Kelvin scans the heroes' stats, noting how they have some weird skills he's never seen before, but Kelvin surmises that he can use this chance to work on his weaknesses. Hearing this, Ephil realizes that Kelvin will be trying out the new item he crafted, the Rank S Skill Eater. All whilst Kelvin is chatting with his summons, the heroes glare at him, accusing him of all the wrongdoings that Kristoff had actually been doing. With preparations on both sides done, the heroes call forth their fairy grace skills, each blessed by light, wind, water and dark fairies. Charging at Kelvin, Toya attempts to force Kelvin into close combat, but Kelvin had anticipated this, jumping back and blasting Setsuna and Toya with projectiles. Having distracted the heroes, Kelvin realized that Nana has snuck up behind him. He realizes that Nana is in possession of a baby dragon, who spits a beam of fire in Kelvin's direction. Casting agility boost on himself, Kelvin easily evades mid-air, only to dash behind Miyabi, touching her and stealing her skill with his Rank S Skill Eater item. Having been crafted from Victor's armor, Sarah reveals that the Skill Eater can take any skill from anything he touches, but it can only hold one skill at a time, but since Kelvin has 2 Skill Eaters, he can steal 2 skills at once. Checking out his stolen skill, Kelvin announces that he had stolen Miyabi's parallel thinking skill, but before he can use it, he dodges Toya's advances. Ordering Nana to heal Miyabi, and Setsuna to protect them, Toya manages to reach Kelvin, swinging his blade, only to be blocked by Kelvin's staff. Knowing that Toya will continue to press him, to prevent him from casting spells, Kelvin commends Toya's thinking, but he states how simple-minded the heroes are. Gripping his fist, Kelvin punches Toya's legendary blade, throwing him off, as Kelvin manages to knock Toya back. This time, Kelvin moves to Toya, sending out a flurry of punches, revealing that he had borrowed Sarah's Rank S martial arts skill. Seeing Toya being pushed back, Setsuna rushes to assist, but Kelvin knows he can't fight both, leaping back and creating a massive stone wall. Believing that the wall will hold the heroes back for a while, Kelvin watches as Setsuna takes a stance, activating her unique skill, only to instantly cut down the stone. Impressed, Kelvin unleashes a huge ball of blue flame, forcing Toya to step in and tank the blow. As the heroes check on Toya's injuries, Toya says he can simply use light magic to heal his wounds, and that their #1 priority is to defeat Kelvin. But before he can say anything else, Setsuna slaps him, reiterating how the 4 of them were hanging out as high school students, but one day they were magically transported to this world. Meeting Melfina and Colette, the person that summoned them, the heroes could only depend on each other, so hearing Toya have no regard for his injuries pissed his members off, as they all want to make it out alive, and even return home together. Hearing his party's words, Toya realizes he was being selfish, rallying everyone together to take down Kelvin. Using his light spirit, Toya emits a bright light, blinding and impressing Kelvin, as he knows Toya is now using his head to fight. Next, Nana binds one of Kelvin's feet with ice, and Miyabi casts a gravity spell, preventing Kelvin from fleeing. Sensing Toya and Setsuna rushing at him, Kelvin decides to detonate the floor beneath him, blasting Toya and Setsuna back, both only surviving due to their unique skills. As the smoke clears, the heroes are in disbelief that such a powerful spell didn't leave a mark on Kelvin, but Kelvin states that his mastery over the spell allows it to do no damage to himself. Applauding the heroes' teamwork, Kelvin begins giving the heroes tips, asking that Nana and Miyabi shoot projectiles to help Toya and Setsuna get close to their targets, and suggests that Toya and Setsuna use speed and agility skills to help move towards their enemies in unpredictable directions. Humiliated that an enemy is looking down on them, the heroes decide to put their all into their next attacks. With Toya dual-wielding and unleashing his sword's power, Setsuna and Toya dash at Kelvin. But Kelvin is caught off guard when Nana releases her ultimate ice spell, binding Kelvin and preventing him from casting any counter spells. Next, Miyabi calls forth a powerful ogre, having it lift her up, allowing her to shoot a dark spell at Kelvin. But Kelvin can't help but smile, calling forth several golems to block any incoming attacks only to distract the heroes. In the meantime, Kelvin activates his newly acquired parallel thinking, analyzing the ice spell that is binding him. To go even further, he begins crafting a spell of his own, drawing the attention of the heroes, prompting Setsuna to begin cutting through the golems with her almighty cleave skill. Just then, Kelvin had created his new skill, instantly breaking the ice spell binding him. Seeing Setsuna approaching fast, with an agility boost, Kelvin commends her for taking his advice, but before she can reach him, Kelvin knocks her out, intercepting her strike. Sensing Miyabi and her ogre behind, Kelvin jumps back, but he knows the weakness of a summon is always the summoner, instantly dashing towards Miyabi and knocking her out. As the ogre summon begins to disappear, Kelvin turns to Nana, who is riding her dragon, casting an ice barrier, planning on distracting Kelvin long enough for Toya to strike. Sadly, Kelvin unleashes a binding spell, following up by knocking Nana unconscious and out of the sky. Catching Nana, Toya becomes infuriated, rushing Kelvin with his blades, demanding to know why such a powerful person is not using his talent to save the world. Spotting Toya's messy fighting style, Kelvin easily catches Toya with an uppercut, but before Toya falls unconscious, Kelvin scolds Toya for trying to lecture him on what to do with his power. As Toya wakes up, he's surprised to see his party gather around him, and all is okay. Sitting up, Toya spots a little girl chatting with Kelvin, scared that Kelvin is terrorizing her. But having a closer look, Toya spots Clotho, learning that Kelvin is the adventurer that had saved the people captured, and is the one that summoned the powerful slime. Personally apologizing for tricking the heroes, Toya wonders why Kelvin would do such a thing, but he deduces that Kelvin was probably trying to make them stronger as a team. Begging for forgiveness, Toya promises to listen to Kelvin moving forward, hoping to get stronger under Kelvin's teachings, but the first thing Kelvin asks the heroes to do is to all strip. Moving ahead in time, Kelvin has returned to Guildmaster Mist, handing over the captured people, who thank Kelvin for rescuing them. With Kristoff and his party captured, Mist states that she will now be able to begin investigating and cracking down on those related to the Black Mist, without any need to fear public opinion. As Kelvin bids Mist farewell, Mist wonders where Kelvin will be heading to next, but all Kelvin can say is that he'll be playing a game with some new friends. Cutting to a cave near the sea, we see the four heroes fighting a giant octopus, with Toya blown back by the creature. Seeing this, Setsuna rushes to cut down the creature, but her blade only bounces off the creature's flexible skin. Whilst this happens, Kelvin and his party are enjoying the show. Suddenly the octopus begins charging up a powerful strike, prompting Kelvin to tell Miyabi and Nana to keep watch of Toya and Setsuna, as they need to help them out if they are in trouble. As some time goes by, Kelvin is getting more and more bored, making Sarah ask why Kelvin is so committed to training people he has just met. But Kelvin thinks about how Melfina was the one who picked them and that they are actually all from Japan as well, so he feels like he has to take care of them. Getting an idea, Sarah suggests that once they get stronger, Kelvin and her should test them, which Kelvin agrees with. After some more time passes, the heroes finally manage to slay the octopus, signaling everyone to have lunch. With everyone sitting down and chatting, the heroes begin talking about how they've noticed dungeon monsters being stronger, ever since the Demon King had been revived. Opening up, the heroes talk about how they were summoned here, and that the first person they met in this world was Colette, the priestess that summoned them. Getting serious, Kelvin questions Toya, reiterating that the heroes are very weak at the moment, wondering what the heroes would do if they were to face a dungeon boss right now. Just then, Sarah rushes towards them, having caught something big whilst fishing. It's revealed that Sarah had accidentally caught a S-rank dungeon dragon, who had been sleeping in the sea. Ignoring Sarah's antics, Kelvin continues to press the heroes, demanding to know what they would do if they encounter a stronger enemy than them. With a calm expression, Toya states that he'll run and escape the enemy, as there is no point allowing his ego to control his actions. Hearing this, Kelvin is satisfied that the heroes will not mindlessly charge at an enemy and give away their lives so meaninglessly. As their conversation wraps up, we cut to several days later, where Kelvin is meeting up with the heroes at the town's boat ports. Thanking Kelvin for all he's done, the heroes all receive a pendant from Kelvin as a parting gift. As the heroes sail away on a boat, they think about how Kelvin and his party were so powerful, having easily defeated that S-rank sea dragon, hoping to one day meet again, but be stronger next time. Back on land, Kelvin watches the heroes sail away, but suddenly turns to Gerald, asking if the Lizea Empire, the empire responsible for cursing Gerald's home, is across the ocean. Shocked, Gerald is surprised to hear that Kelvin still remembers his backstory, but Kelvin asks Gerald if their party as of right now could wipe out the entire empire. Pondering deeply for a bit, Gerald grows excited at avenging his home, but Kelvin reasons that they should probably get much stronger before they consider such a thing. As Kelvin and Gerald meet back up with Ephil compliments Kelvin's kind heart, revealing that the pendants are able to give the wearers a boost to all their stats, and even have a secret functionality in case of emergencies. Before Kelvin can reveal what that secret is, Sarah shows up, asking to know what they're talking about. Before Kelvin can scold Sarah for being so nosy, Sarah tells Kelvin that a messenger sent by Mist is here. Hearing this, Kelvin tells everyone that the time has come, where he'll finally get to taste the nostalgic feeling of rice again, as they will be meeting with the king of this town. Heading to the king's castle, everyone notes the Japanese-styled castle, but Gerald states the first ever king of this town was actually summoned from another world, and probably influenced how things would behave here. As they enter the castle, they all take off their shoes, kneeling before the ruler of the castle. Introducing herself as Tsubaki Fujiwara, Kelvin immediately notes how the ruler's name is definitely Japanese-styled. Checking on his summons, Kelvin notes how formal Sarah is acting, teasing her being a completely different person compared to her usual childish self. Suddenly Tsubaki speaks up, thanking Kelvin and his party for not only capturing the Black Wind bandits but also slaying the rank S dragon guarding the seas. As a token of appreciation, Tsubaki states that she'll grant any wish of Kelvin's, but is surprised to hear that Kelvin only wishes for a crop that is only found here in town. Smiling, Tsubaki reveals that this was all a test, as normal people would be greedy and ask for many things, but Kelvin is the first to impress her. Ordering her people to give Kelvin rice, she unveils a banquet specially prepared to celebrate Kelvin and his party's amazing feats. As Kelvin stuffs his face with his old world's cuisine, Gerald and Sarah are seen indulging in some alcohol, all whilst Ephil is learning some recipes from the chefs responsible for this special meal. Several days later, Kelvin reveals that he has been staying in the castle, as Tsubaki has invited him and his party to rest for a while. Hearing a knock at the door, Ephil appears with some Japanese food, which she has beautifully prepared. Ephil tells Kelvin that the others are all training, but Kelvin could care less, as Queen Tsubaki is now in the same room sharing a meal with him. Wondering why Tsubaki is even here, Tsubaki states that she simply wants to taste Ephil's cooking, amazed that she's able to pick up on the recipes and cooking styles so fast. Knowing that Ephil's rank S cooking ability is probably the reason for Ephil's amazing food, Kelvin suddenly notices Tsubaki getting too close with him, rubbing against him, asking that he and his party permanently stay at her castle. Fighting Tsubaki's advances, Kelvin refuses her offer, stating that he must return to his previous town, as he can't stay in one place. Apologizing for being selfish, Tsubaki reveals that she can help get Kelvin and his party back to the other town fast, taking them to a teleporting gate. Wondering why the heroes didn't just teleport to their next location, Kelvin learns that teleporting takes a massive amount of energy and that both countries must allow people to use their gates. Finally returning to the inn, Claire teases Kelvin for catching the eye of Tsubaki, the ruler of a country, but Kelvin just ignores Claire. Ephil suddenly wonders what Kelvin would be doing today, prompting Kelvin to say that he'll be relaxing today, since he has just bought a new house. With Kelvin and his party amazed at the upgraded space, Sarah can't help but explore the building, prompting Ephil to check out the kitchen, Gerald to find a good training location and Clotho to explore the outside. Checking out the palace himself, Kelvin is happy to see a bath in his new home, but is soon called to greet his new housekeepers. Recognizing them as the girls that he saved, the girls officially introduce themselves as Ellie and her daughter Luca. That night, Kelvin bathes for the first time in this world, immediately heading to bed, thinking about how it feels weird to be sleeping in an actual bed. Before he drifts off, he notices that Melfina has returned, excited to see her avatar. Reaching out his arm, Kevlin calls for Melfina to appear, finally summoning her. Entering through a gate, Melfina shows off her majestic wings, smirking as she meets Kelvin's eyes. Kelvin can't help but admit that Melfina is his type. The next morning, Kelvin and all his summons watch as Melfina indulges on her first meal, with her new avatar. Kelvin notes how refreshing it is to finally have her back with the gang, but Melfina states that it was quite a hassle to meet back up, as Kelvin had moved into this new mansion without telling her. Butting in, Gerald doesn't recognize Melfina, asking who she is, but is surprised to recognize her voice. Hearing this, Sarah officially greets Melfina, which makes Melfina uneasy, as she feels bad for Sarah's father, the former Demon King, being slayed in the world Melfina governed. Sarah states that Melfina shouldn't feel guilty, as Sarah knows that Melfina was not responsible for summoning the hero that ended up taking her father's life. Moving on, Melfina teases Kelvin, having assumed that Kelvin would bring more girls into his party whilst she was away, but Kelvin denies this. Changing locations, the gang wonder if they should continue to call Melfina her name, as Melfina is a unique name that only the goddess of this world has. Agreeing, Melfina asks everyone to officially call her Mel, which everyone is happy to do. Since Melfina is grateful for Kelvin summoning her, she casts a Grace of Reincarnation spell on Kelvin, as a gift. Melfina explains that the Grace spell has two unique effects. The first is that Kelvin will be able to prevent death from a fatal wound once every month. Hearing this, Kelvin is shocked that he has just been given such an absurd skill, but Sarah notes how she has no reason to hold back when sparring him. The second skill and more important skill, Melfina states that Kelvin now has the ability to summon his own heroes. Wanting to test out Melfina's capabilities, Sarah and Melfina head to the training room, both advancing towards one another. As Gerald and Luca watch the girls' epic battle, Kelvin is seen outside, wondering if Toya and the other heroes had made it to their destination safely. Kelvin also begins to think about how the prophecy didn't specify who should slay the Demon King, and only that the Demon King needed to be killed. Back with the girls, Sarah unsheathes the claws from one of her gloves, prompting Melfina to match her power, revealing her angelic armor. When the girls clash once again, Sarah is barely able to overpower Melfina, impressing Melfina. Seeing Melfina and Sarah so fired up, Gerald wonders the reason for the girls' energy, but learns that they were fighting to see who could share a bed with Kelvin that night. Later that day, Sarah and Melfina wash up in the indoor hot spring, thankful to Kelvin for healing their wounds. With Ephil entering to check up on the girls, the three all agree that Kelvin is clearly distraught about something, having barely spoken all day. As the sun begins to set, Kelvin is seen gazing off into a nearby pond, only to be called by Melfina, who has brought him some snacks. Wanting to cheer Kelvin up, Melfina reminds him that she is his wife, but Kelvin is only interested in learning why heroes are so important, when the Demon King can be slayed by anyone. Getting serious, Melfina states that in this world, the cycle of a Demon King being born and slayed is inevitable, and even as the governor of the world, Melfina is unable to predict who the next Demon King is. Additionally, all Demon Kings have a built-in skill, Papillas. Papillas warps the user's personality, forcing them to become an evil being, but Papillas also grants the user's immunity to all skills in this world, making them like a god. Hearing this, Kelvin wonders how the Demon King can die, but Melfina reminds Kelvin that the Demon King is immune to all skills in this world, so beings from other worlds can bypass the Demon King's immunity as they are not from this world. This explains why no one but summons from other worlds end up slaying the Demon King. Since Kelvin was reincarnated with no memories, he was able to easily take in everything that was happening with this world, but he can only imagine how tough it was for Toya and his party to accept their new situation. Still, Kelvin is disgusted by the idea of bringing people from another world, that had lives and a future, forcing them to restart in this new world. Knowing this, Melfina reveals that Kelvin can summon heroes from another world, via teleportation or reincarnation. Teleportation summons heroes that were still alive from another world, whereas reincarnation takes the soul of a dead person and brings them to this world. In other words, Toya and his party were teleported, and Kelvin was reincarnated. With another option, Kelvin wonders if he can pick the reincarnated soul, but Melfina states that reincarnated souls are chosen at random and that it takes a huge amount of MP. With more MP used for the summon, the stronger the hero is. As Melfina leaves, she asks that Kelvin not rush into things. That night, Kelvin gathers everyone in his mansion, informing them that he has decided to reincarnate a hero and have them join his party. Since he knows that he should continue to expand his party, he states that adding a hero to his party will make it more interesting. Calling for all his summons to return, Kelvin drinks a potion to completely restore his MP, to prepare to cast the summoning spell. Chanting the reincarnation spell, Kelvin chooses to use up all but one of his MP, to summon a single hero, hoping to summon the strongest hero he possibly can. As he slams his staff into the ground, he carves out a summoning circle, passing all MP into the circle. As Kelvin waits for the summoning to finish, he wonders what type of person the hero could be, reasoning that the summon is probably choosing their skills at this moment. Suddenly Kelvin is interrupted when the circle begins to glow. Imploding and leaving behind a cloud of dust, the circle summons a child, who Kelvin greets, prompting the child to introduce themselves as Ryo Saki. Ryo Saki states how she was just talking with an angel, who Kelvin learns is someone that Melfina had placed in charge whilst she was away. Seeing that Ryo is still just a child, Kelvin apologizes to Ryo for summoning her, but Ryo states that she was grateful to be given a second chance, breaking down into tears, before collapsing due to exhaustion. Kelvin wonders if this was right to summon a child, but Melfina reassures Kelvin that Ryo is the strongest hero that Kelvin could have summoned. Just then, Kelvin too begins to stumble around. Having used up all his MP, Kelvin collapses next to Ryo. That night, Ryo awakes from her dream, having remembered that she had passed away in a hospital at such a young age. Heading out of bed, Ryo admires the beautiful outside world, running and falling onto the grass with joy. Having spotted Ryo leave her room, Kelvin walks up to Ryo, revealing that he too was reincarnated into this world, but unlike her he has no memories of his past life. Kelvin goes on to explain his journey, and how he met the party members and grew so strong, inspiring Ryo. Getting serious, Kelvin asks if Ryo really wants to be here, but Ryo reveals that she had been sick all her life, to a point of being bedridden in a hospital, unable to play outside with other kids, and only able to watch through the hospital window of other kids playing. Since Ryo was happy to be given a second chance in life with this new body, Ryo offers to join Kelvin's party, as thanks for everything. Happy to see Ryo ecstatic, Kelvin mentions how he would like to keep Ryo's identity of a reincarnated hero a secret, and instead have her be his little sister in this world. Hearing this, Ryo gets excited, having been an only child her entire life. On top of that, Kelvin asks to change Ryo's name to Ryan, which Ryan happily agrees with, earning herself a head pat as Kelvin welcomes her to the team. Late at night, Kelvin rolls in his bed, turning to his side only to realize that Sarah is lying next to him. Thinking back, Kelvin remembers that Eiffel and Sarah were fighting over who would get to sleep next to him. Suddenly, Melfina hugs Kelvin from behind, mumbling about how she wants to eat more of Kelvin's Japanese food, making Kelvin adore her. Before he's able to head back to sleep, he feels Ryan clinging to his legs, happy that she has gotten so comfortable being around him. As Kelvin takes a moment to admire his newfound life, he begins to wonder how this life compares to his past, but quickly brushes that thought off as he clearly can't remember anything from his past life. No longer tired, Kelvin gets out of bed, wondering how busy today will be. Heading into the dark purple forest, we see Kelvin, Melfina and the maids Ellie and Ruka watch as Ryan explores the forest. Speaking up, Ellie asks Kelvin why her daughter and her are here in the forest, but Kelvin announces that he plans on having the two increase their levels, and that there are golems guarding his mansion whilst they're out here, so there is no need to worry about intruders. Hearing this, Ruka states that she hasn't personally fought any monsters before, which Kelvin reassures the two that they'll be waiting outside of the dungeon with Ryan and they'll be able to gain XP with Kelvin's XP sharing skill. Wondering what this skill is, Melfina explains to the girls that Kelvin and his party members all share the XP they gain from slaying monsters. This explains why Gerald, Clotho and Sarah are slaying monsters in the nearby vicinity. Seeing his 3 summons fired up, Kelvin asks the 3 not to go overboard, but suddenly Ryan, Ellie and Ruka all level up. With all 3 checking their stats, the 3 are surprised to see the huge boost in stats, all thanks to the XP sharing. Suddenly, Eiffel senses a powerful shadow wolf approaching their location, but Kelvin asks everyone to allow the wolf to pass through. Asking Ryan if she likes dogs, Ryan gleefully states that she had dreamed of having a pet dog, which catches Kelvin's attention. Stepping out of the shadows, the wolf emits an intimidating aura, prompting Melfina to guard Ellie and Ruka. Stepping up himself, Kelvin watches as the wolf pounces towards his party, but Kelvin intercepts the wolf's leap, casting a powerful gravity spell, grounding the wolf. As Ryan watches in amazement at Kelvin's skills, Kelvin scans the wolf's stats, realizing that it is quite weak, easily forming a contract and taming it. Summoning his new wolf companion, Ruka and Ryan can't help but cuddle the fluffy creature for a bit. Just then, Eiffel spots some fellow adventurers approaching their location. Cleaning up the place a bit, Kelvin greets them, explaining that he was simply having a little picnic near the forest's entrance. Surprised to hear this, the leader of the party tells Kelvin the good news, revealing that he and his party recently got the option to promote to rank B, and their task is to hunt certain creatures in this dark purple forest. Seeing the others with Kelvin, and his party get jealous, wondering why there are so many gorgeous ladies with Kelvin. Introducing Ellie and Ruka as his new maids, Melfina and Ryan introduce themselves, but this only makes the men more jealous, running off. With Gerald, Sarah and Clotho returning to the picnic site, they mention how they just ran into and his party, learning that and his members are here to slay some monsters. Hearing this, Gerald, Sarah and Clotho reveal that they slayed all the monsters in this forest, which Eiffel confirms. Later that day, Kelvin apologizes to as he couldn't complete his rank-up exam, as there were no monsters left for him to hunt. Brushing that aside, commends Kelvin's party, accidentally letting slip that Kelvin will get to take his rank S rank-up exam soon. Returning to the mansion, Kelvin helps Ryan wash their new wolf, all whilst Kelvin thinks about how the guildmaster had planned on issuing the rank S exam to Kelvin without telling him. Realizing that this will be his first official rank-up exam, Kelvin wonders what it could possibly be, but is distracted when he hears Ryan calling their new wolf Alex. Washing away all the soap, Kelvin accidentally gets wet, but gives Alex a new leash, assigning Alex as Ryan's new official partner. Thankful for the new companion, Ryan reveals that she can actually understand Alex's wolf language, having a special skill for that. Just then Gerald calls for Ryan, stating that it's time for her training session. As the day goes by, Ryan is seen training with Gerald, fishing with Sarah, stretching with the maids and even returning to the inn to spend time with the others. As the sun begins to set, Ryan rides with Alex towards a cliff, watching as the sun sets, only to return home. As Ryan and Alex fall asleep, Melfina and Kelvin can't help but adore them. That night, Kelvin wakes up, greeting Sarah, Ryan and Alex, impressed that they sensed the strange men surrounding their mansion at this time. Ryan admits that Sarah was the one that woke her up, and Kelvin states that he had told Melfina and Eiffel to head to bed and for Gerald to guard Ellie and Ruka's room. Scanning the surrounding area, Kelvin notes that there are 14 men, but their strongest man is level 26. Wondering how Kelvin can sense the surrounding area, Kelvin reveals that he had borrowed Effie's farsight skill, but changes the topic, asking if Ryan and Alex are up for a challenge. Replying yes, Kelvin asks that Ryan and Alex defeat all the men, instructing her to take down the men one by one. As insurance, Kelvin has Clotho create a mini version of itself, who'll be by Ryan's side. On top of that, Kelvin will continuously pass information on the men's location to her, and finally Kelvin hands her a sword. Having crafted the blade himself, Kelvin reveals that it's a resonating mithril sword, a very powerful blade. Now armed and ready, Ryan heads out, as we cut to one of the men explaining that they have to kill Kelvin, as Kelvin is an obstacle in their greater scheme. As Ryan waits outside for the men to attack, she thinks about how lucky she was to be surrounded by such powerful mentors, only to rush towards the approaching men. As Kelvin and Sarah watch from the mansion, they note how Ryan is still stiff with her movements, managing to cut down one of the men, as Alex protects her rear. Sarah notes how Ryan has the ability to achieve a rank S swordsmanship skill if she continues to train. A couple minutes go by, and most of the men have been defeated. As Kelvin, Sarah and Clotho head outside, Kelvin says he'll go hunt for the remaining men, asking Sarah and Clotho to clean up. Cutting to the level 26 man, we see him shocked that his men haven't returned, but as he turns to leave, he sees Kelvin step out from the shadows, realizing that Kelvin is far stronger than he thought. Elsewhere, we see the emperor of the nation Trison holding a round table meeting. Having invited his son, and his 4 powerful generals, demanding to know why they had failed to form an alliance with other countries. Due to the issue with Kristoff falsely claiming to be working under them, 3 other countries have already agreed to form an alliance against them. Speaking up, Tristan, one of Trison's generals, wonders what would happen if their nation goes to war with the other three, stating that their nation is quite large even when compared to the other three countries combined. Asking for a vote, Tristan manages to sway the emperor's son into agreeing, but is met with 2 votes against from the princess and the 4th general. Excited at the thought of war, the emperor summons the 5th general, who had purposely not attended the round table meeting. Cutting elsewhere, we see a knight heading through a palace, weirded out by the guards, only to enter a disturbing room. Calling out to the 5th general, the knight tells Clive that the emperor wants to speak to him, prompting Clive to stand up, completely naked. Following Kelvin and his party, we see them traveling by carriage, heading southwest through a forest. As Melfina flies above the carriage, Kelvin thinks about how they're all in a rush, heading towards an elven village. As they get deeper into the forest, Eiffel mentions how the forest feels familiar, but Kelvin reasons that it's her elven blood that makes her feel at home in any forest. Butting in, Sarah wonders why there are even elves on this eastern continent they're currently on, but Melfina states that whilst Sarah was sealed away, elves had migrated from a nearby continent onto this one, all protected by the town of Gon. Deep in thought, Kelvin thinks about their reason for heading to this elven village, revealing that he had told the guildmaster that the assassins were sent from Trison. Hearing this, the guildmaster admits that Trison had been acting suspicious, insisting that the Black Wind members Kelvin had captured a while ago had nothing to do with the Trison kingdom. Since it seems that Trison are sending people after Kelvin, the guildmaster reveals that he has received reports of multiple other towns nearby being disturbed, all coincidentally towns right next to the kingdom of Trison. Additionally, the guildmaster states that Trison had started to skirmish with the town of Gon. Luckily there has been no reports from the town of Peace, Perith, nor the water agriculture town, Turai. Hearing that Trison is focusing on Gon, Kelvin wonders if Trison's motive is to capture slaves, which the guildmaster confirms. Believing that there must have been some sort of power swap on Trison, the guildmaster warns Kelvin to be ready in case they send more people after Kelvin, or worse, wage war. Before Kelvin leaves, the guildmaster mentions how he has a special task for Kelvin, handing Kelvin a letter. The guildmaster reveals that it's a special S-rank up exam from Lenhart Gon, the Beast King of Gon. Telling his party about the news, everyone has nothing but respect for Kelvin, being noticed by the ruler of Gon. Sarah wonders what are the conditions needed to rank up to S, learning that Kelvin needs approval from 2 rulers, but luckily Queen Tsubaki from Turai had approved, which must have made King Lenhart curious about Kelvin. Eiffel asks what this King Lenhart is like, prompting Melfina to tell everyone that due to a custom in his town, Lenhart at a young age had left town to go on a journey, and when he returned he had achieved the rank S adventurer status. Hearing this, Kelvin has nothing but respect for Lenhart, but secretly wonders what would happen if they clashed. Finding it weird, Ryan wonders why such a powerful king would need the help of their party, but Kelvin states that something is definitely wrong with their circumstances and that the kingdom of Trison is planning something. Just then, Kelvin senses an arrow flying towards their carriage, but it had been purposely fired as a warning shot by elves. Diffusing the situation, Kelvin announces that he had been purposely summoned by King Lenohart himself, showing off the invitation letter. Apologizing for attacking them, the elder of the elven village Nelraz appears. As Nelraz approaches Kelvin's party, he is stunned, calling out to Lumal, all whilst staring at Eiffel. Returning to his village first, Nelraz sits with Kelvin and his party, apologizing for mistaking Eiffel for someone he knew. Wondering who this Lumal is, Kelvin asks that Nelraz tell them more about this Lumal, hoping to learn about Effie's past. Understanding the situation, Nelraz talks about a terrible incident 20 years ago on a separate continent. He had lived peacefully in his village, until one day they were attacked by a fire dragon king. The dragon king had apparently been humiliated by an elf, demanding to offer the elf, but when no one confessed, the dragon king began tearing through the village, resulting in half of the elves passing. The dragon king had only stopped when an elf by the name of Lumal stepped up, offering to be a sacrificial lamb, but the dragon king knew she wasn't the one she was looking for. Instead, the dragon king asked for Lumal's hand in marriage, and in return he would cease the violence. Accepting, Lumal flew away with the dragon king, but this leaves Kelvin wondering why he relocated here. Nelraz reluctantly revealed that they had one day stumbled upon Lumal's corpse in the forest. Fearing that the dragon king would return, Nelraz and his town fled. Hearing all of this, Sarah wonders if Ethel is Lumel's daughter, but Melfina corrects her, stating that Ethel is an half-elf, meaning that she is of human and elven descent, and if an elf was to have a child with a dragon, the dragon blood would easily override the elven blood. Still, the fact that Ethel looks so alike to Lumel, Kelvin doesn't rule out that Lumel and Ethel may be related. Thanking Nelris for the details, Ethel states that learning about her past isn't a priority, as she is currently the happiest person in the world, being with Kelvin and the others. Happy to hear that, Nelris asks to now get onto why Kelvin is here. Nelris states that King Lenhart had believed that there is a new type of monster, solely kidnapping elves. Nelris reveals that he has placed special talismans throughout the forest to lead creatures away from their village, but Kelvin thinks about how those talismans can easily be dispelled, just like how Kelvin found where this village was. Nelris adds that it seems this special monster only focuses on kidnapping and not killing, and that even soldiers from Gon failed to stop it. Understanding the situation, Kelvin asks for permission to renovate the elven village, promising to not allow any more of the elves be taken. Trusting Kelvin's words, Nelris allows it, making Kelvin excited to face these monsters. That night, we cut to several monsters, all being commanded by some men. These men begin mocking the weak Gon soldiers sent to stop them, stating that their army is composed of demons and beasts. The leader of this shady group reveals that General Tristan had purposely fed Gon information regarding the attackers, and simply killed whoever Gon sent at them, stating that they have special collars that can tame any creature, even S-rank monsters. As the shady men continue closer to the elven village, one of them is suddenly shot down, putting everyone on guard, as they can't see the attackers. Cutting to Ethel and Kelvin, we see Kelvin has borrowed Effie's farsight skill, both able to spot the shady men from afar. With Ethel sniping the men from afar, Ethel thanks Kelvin for crafting her this new silent bow. Kelvin mentions how he had built a watchtower that can't be seen under Melfina's fog spell. The water surrounding the village has been cursed with Sarah's black magic and Kelvin's party are on standby. With all preparations ready, Kelvin orders his party to begin their mission. With Ryan and Melfina making their way through the shady men and towards their base, we see the shady men's vice commander learn of his men being wiped out by adventurers. Blowing on a horn, the vice commander summons a gigant lord, prompting Melfina to leave the creature to Ryan. Running along the gigant lord's arm, Ryan attempts to plunge her blade into the creature, but the gigant lord's skiing is too thick, shattering her blade. Easily swiping Ryan away, Ryan gets serious, dual-wielding sword all whilst Alex equips a blade for himself. Fusing their blade with lighting, Ryan and her wolf easily strike down the gigant lord, shocking everyone. Just then the vice commander calls for the gigant lord to awaken, imbuing and reviving the gigant lord with flames. Comparing the gigant lord's flames to Sarah's flames, Ryan has nothing to fear, simply enhancing her strikes with more potent lightning, this time releasing a more powerful lightning strike, ending the battle for good. As Melfina praises Ryan's hard work, we cut back to Kelvin, who senses a powerful incoming projectile, barely able to block it. Out of nowhere, a mysterious man floating in appears with his female servants, ready to fight Kelvin. With the mysterious man hovering closer to Kelvin and Ethel notices Kelvin is clearly on guard. Spotting Ethel, the mysterious man grins, having never seen such an elf so beautiful as her, he begins casting a spell. Spotting the incantation, Kelvin fires a spell to disrupt the cast, calling out the mysterious man for trying to hypnotize Ethel. Seeing Kelvin so mad, the mysterious man reveals himself as Clive, one of Trison's 5 generals, all whilst smirking and mocking Kelvin. Pissed, Kelvin warns Clive to back off, but Clive simply continues to mock him, prompting Kelvin to scan Clive's stats. Stunned by Clive's rank, Kelvin deduces that Clive is reincarnated, pissing Clive off, as his concealment ability is rank A, deducing that Kelvin too is reincarnated. Knowing it's too dangerous, Kelvin asks Ethel to leave, as he plans to destroy the surrounding area. Obeying, Ethel activates her stealth, fleeing the scene, but sad that Ethel has disappeared. Clive calls out to Ethel, giving Kelvin the opening to cast a wind spell, blowing Clive and his servants back. Breaking down the watchtower, Kelvin constructs 4 obsidian lances, having them float beside him. Spotting Clive off in the distance, Kelvin shoots one of the lances, but Clive manages to block the lance, announcing that he is meant to be the main character in this world. Hearing Clive's ambitions, Kelvin mocks Clive's avatar, this time sending all 4 lances towards Clive. Erecting his barrier again, Kelvin follows up with some bolts of energy, but Clive reveals that his helix barrier blocks any physical and magical attacks. But Clive admits that Kelvin's lances are strong, as his barrier normally deletes any projectile that collides with his barrier. Having never seen such a powerful barrier, Kelvin smirks, but suddenly senses Clive's servants surrounding him. Blocking one of their advances, Kelvin realizes that the servants have all been hypnotized by Clive, but Clive simply lies, stating that they all willingly are serving him. Changing topics, Clive asks for Kelvin to just surrender, as Kelvin is outnumbered, but suddenly a beam of light pierces through Clive's helix barrier, realizing it was Eiffel that fired that deadly shot. Whilst Clive was distracted, Kelvin takes the chance to craft golems, able to freely act and use abilities, each equipped with a lance. Impressed at Kelvin's dark magic, Clive happily sends his servants to face off against the golems, but before Kelvin sends his golems off, he orders the golems to simply distract and not kill the servants. Now with both of them alone, Clive gets serious, prompting both of them to soar through the air. Impressed that Kelvin can keep up with his speed, Clive fires several shots, but Kelvin easily dodges. Retaliating, Kelvin chases after Clive, firing projectiles that disappear upon collision with Clive's helix barrier. Releasing a barrage of beams, Clive tries to catch Kelvin off guard, but Kelvin easily dispels them, getting pissed that Clive's beams almost killed his own servants. Disgusted, Kelvin flies higher up, forcing Clive to follow, until they're both above the clouds. Chatting for a bit, Clive talks about how in this world, he has been granted cheat skills, so the only thing he can look forward to is fighting. Calling out Kelvin for liking the feeling of fighting as well, Kelvin admits that he's guilty of seeking stronger and stronger opponents, but he also states that spending time with people is quite important as well. Mad that Kelvin doesn't see eye to eye with him, Clive activates his helix barrier, charging at Kelvin. Meeting Clive's advance, Kelvin uses his staff to attempt to pierce the barrier. With a huge flash of light, Kelvin has managed to scratch Clive's face, but in exchange has lost his staff. Infuriated that Kelvin has scratched his beautiful face, Clive reveals his final trump card, casting a rank S spell. Conjuring up a huge ball of energy, Clive's spell begins creating a massive tornado, disrupting everything and everyone in the surrounding area. Amazed by the spell's overwhelming aura, Kelvin asks Clotho to spit out his rank S Blackstaff of Disaster, facing the spell head-on. As everyone watches Kelvin and Clive's battle, Kelvin begins channeling a spell of his own, revealing his Boreas Death Scythe spell. Having turned his staff into a scythe, Kelvin leaps towards the spell, easily slicing the spell in half, along with Clive who was behind it. Having only cut off Clive's legs, Kelvin goes to finish the job, but before he can, is interrupted by Tristan riding on a golem, another one of Trison's generals. Realizing that Tristan has rescued Clive, Kelvin deduces that Tristan has some sort of teleportation magic, impressing Tristan. Since his teleportation magic has been found out, Tristan admits that Kelvin is the victor today, but states that they'll meet again someday, teleporting away with Clive. Checking up on his party, Kelvin is mad that he wasn't able to finish off Clive, calling their fight today a draw. As Kelvin returns to check on the village, we see Eiffel filling Gerald and Nelras in on Kelvin defeating a rank S general all whilst protecting his village. Teasing Eiffel a bit, Gerald talks about how much Kelvin cares about Eiffel, but to make it worse, Kelvin appears, making Eiffel blush. As Ryan, Sarah and Melfina meet up with Kelvin, Kelvin praises Ryan and Alex, having been able to slay the huge creature earlier. Cutting to Clive, we see him awaken tied up to a table, wondering how he survived. Tristan appears with some servants, stating that he healed Clive's wounds, but in exchange Clive will have to be a test dummy for all the cursed weapons he's in possession of, allowing his servants to test the weapons on Clive's body. Back at the Elven village, we see that Nelras has thrown a party celebrating Kelvin and his party's success with protecting their village. Zooming out, we see Kelvin sitting on a mountain, thinking about life, only to be interrupted by Eiffel. Wondering what Kelvin is thinking about, Kelvin brushes it off, but suddenly regains some broken memories, hiding the memories for now. Wondering what Eiffel has in the box she's carrying, Eiffel states that it's a piece of jewelry that Lumel had left behind, and now Nelras has chosen to give it to her. Tying the jewelry around Eiffel, Eiffel asks if she can stay with Kelvin forever, which Kelvin happily agrees to. Just then, the remainder of Kelvin's party interrupted, wanting to join Kelvin and Eiffel's little conversation. At the same time, an elf girl clings onto Kelvin, thanking him for saving her village, but begins to chuckle. Before Kelvin can be weirded out, the elf reveals herself as Lenhart, stating that he has an item to shapeshift. Having seen Kelvin's fight with Clive, Lenhart agrees to approve Kelvin to be rank S, but adds that he must attend a ceremony where other rank S's will duel him. The series ends with Kelvin grinning at the fact that he gets to see what other types of rank S adventurers exist in this world. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like and comment.